Hey guys, I want to take a minute to thank AMC Shudder for sponsoring this video. If you enjoy watching my videos, then you will love the phenomenal horror movies and TV shows that Shudder offers, especially with Halloween right around the corner. From my experience, Shudder truly is the Netflix for horror. The best part is they are always releasing new timeless classics, such as the movie Carrie, based on Stephen King's popular horror novel, along with the famous TV series Creepshow. You can start watching now by easily downloading the Shudder app on all your favorite devices, such as your iPhone, iPad, or Android. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store to download it for free. It's an extremely easy-to-use streaming service that features the best selection of horror, thriller, and supernatural movies, from Hollywood favorites and cult classics to original series and critically acclaimed new genre films you will not find anywhere else, streaming uncut and commercial-free. Get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content today. You won't want to miss Joe Bob's new Halloween Hoedown that just premiered October 8th. To try Shudder completely free for 30 days, just go to Shudder.com and use promo code NOSLEEP during sign-up. You will instantly gain access to all the amazing movies and TV shows Shudder has to offer. After the 30 days are over, it's only $5.99 per month or $56.99 annually. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Go to Shudder.com today to sign up for free. That's SHUDDER.com. And be sure to use promo code NOSLEEP at sign up. Now time for the story. The last time we really celebrated Halloween was on the 31st of October, 2005. My wife and I had both grown up and found our place in a small, friendly neighborhood. It was full of families that loved the fun tradition of trick-or-treating. Each year, dozens of tiny monsters would pour out onto the street, looking for all sorts of candies to fill their bags. Linda and I were thrilled when our own son, Matt, finally grew old enough to partake himself. And at the ripe old age of 5, we accompanied him on his first journey into the night, making sure he'd stay safe. He was a bit nervous at first, seeing all the masked children running about, some jumping out from bushes in futile attempts at scaring their friends. But he quickly came to enjoy the sight. We dressed him up as a tiny version of Death, with a minuscule scythe made from wood. He'd swing it around clumsily, more often than not, hitting himself in the head. Together, we made our way from house to house, watching as Matt's bag slowly filled up. Before we'd even made it halfway through, we knew there would be no way he'd finish a fraction of the candy without getting a tummy ache, meaning I'd have to find a way to sneakily claim some of his treasure for myself. A lesson in sharing, perhaps. As the clock struck 9, it was the high point for the kids. Most were running on a scheduled curfew that would take effect at 10, meaning there was precious little time to knock on as many doors as possible. I took note of a particularly good costume that looked like a demon, full on with wings and a tail swinging with each step. That temporary distraction was all it took. My wife had just turned to say goodbye to one of the neighbors, and as we reverted our attention to Matt, he was just gone. We didn't take it too seriously at first. We figured he was waiting around a corner, preparing to jump out and scare us. But as we called his name, he still didn't respond. "Matt!" Linda called out, getting more distressed by each second. I ran around the houses, checked in the bushes, scouted the crowds of costumed kids, but he was nowhere to be found. We started knocking on doors and asking bystanders if they'd seen him, at which point we quickly realized that the entire neighborhood had fallen into a state of panic. There were parents all over, running around and calling out the names of their children. "Have you seen Dylan?" one of them asked with a panic in their voice. 12 kids had gone missing in the span of a single minute, all disappearing without a trace. Those who remained were quickly escorted back inside as the parents ran around the neighborhood in a frantic but futile search. The police arrived swiftly, taking questions and joining in. But they too were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the event. Never had a kid gone missing more than a couple of hours, much less without a trail. But that night, a dozen children vanished off the face of the earth, and despite every effort made, they could not be found. The search went on for weeks, then months, and by the time a year had passed, the missing children were unofficially declared dead as means to give the families closure. But no answer could be given, and in the wake of Halloween 2005, our neighborhood fell into a deep depression. All public events were canceled, and Halloween itself became a day we could only try to ignore. Linda and I never stopped looking, but without anything to go on, We could only look to others who'd experienced similar events. But wherever we turned, we were given the same answer. You have to let it go. You have to move on. Still, we managed to stay together. Though I could see Matt's eyes in my wife's, and she saw his smile in mine, our love was the only thing preventing us from drifting to madness. Each Halloween, we'd lock our doors, hide away from the world until the day passed. A tragic tradition that would occupy each of the next 10 years. And as time passed, we tried to get back on with our lives. Our son was nothing more than pictures and memories that haunted us. That was how it would be until Halloween of 2015. We were sitting in our living room, looking through old pictures when we heard a scream coming from the street. Thinking someone was in danger, we rushed outside. We found one of our neighbors tightly hugging a little girl dressed as a witch. It was an odd sight, considering our neighborhood didn't celebrate Halloween. One made even stranger by the fact that our neighbor was hugging a random girl. "Julie, I can't believe it's you," the woman cried. The name rang a bell, and I quickly realized it was the name of her daughter that had vanished on Halloween 2005. She had been 10 on the day she vanished, and despite a decade having passed, she hadn't aged a day. She'd returned wearing the same clothes, though a bit worn out. 2 more of the missing children were found shortly after, both wearing their costumes from 10 years ago, not having aged even a bit. Within the next hour, more children kept reappearing in the same spots they'd vanished from. Linda and I ran towards the last place we'd seen Matt, not willing to believe, but desperate to see our son again. Sure enough, there he was, still dressed as Death, but missing his scythe. We called his name in tears as we ran towards him, but he didn't share the same enthusiasm. He stared at us with an empty, horrified look in his eyes, as if he couldn't trust what he was seeing. We kneeled down and hugged him tightly, expecting some sort of reciprocation, yet he didn't seem happy to see us. He just seemed afraid. Each of the returned children behaved the same, nervous, barely responsive, traumatized by an experience none of us could even begin to understand. They were all brought to the hospital for observation, where a massive team of specialists were brought in an attempt at understanding the situation, but none were successful. In the end, once they'd been declared physically healthy, they were taken to a psychiatric facility for rehabilitation. I'm not going to say it didn't help, but these kids were traumatized by something none of us could even begin to comprehend, and not one of them ever spoke up about it. They remained under the care of doctors for 3 months until they were rehabilitated enough to come home. Even then, none of them were themselves. We were advised to take care of them and not pry into what happened until they were ready. Over the course of the next few months, Matt hardly ever left his room. He barely ate. He didn't play with his toys. He'd just sit by the window and stare onto the street, or spend hours drawing things he'd never let us see. They looked like symbols, but he'd always hide them away in his secret chest. Only on a rare occasion he'd whisper a sentence or two. "They're coming," he said. "Who's coming?" I asked. "The Watchers." "Who are they?" He'd freeze up as he heard that question, but I knew it had something to do with his disappearance. And the closer we got to Halloween of 2016, the more frantic his whispers would get. "I don't want to go back," he said, but he wasn't talking to us. "Who are you talking to, Matt?" "They can hear us." "Who?" "The Watchers," he repeated. "Who are they?" "They needed us to make the door into our world. Now they are just waiting," he whispered. "Waiting for what?" I asked, my heart racing within my chest. "The night when both worlds come together." He stopped talking after that, at which point I finally decided it was time to invade his privacy. Once Matt had gone to sleep that night, I dug through his locked chest of drawings. I expected depictions of his dark thoughts or an insight into the horrific memories he had. But instead, I only found hundreds upon hundreds of pages, each filled to the brim with text written in an unknown language. I took pictures and put the papers back, hoping he wouldn't notice. Then I sent them around to the other parents who'd also lost their kids during the vanishing. Most of them had no clue, hadn't even bothered to check what their kids were drawing. Only a few were worried enough to invade their privacy, but were too ashamed and scared to share the message. Though no one had been able to decipher the language, some had noticed a repeated pattern. We decided to hire professional help, and due to the mystery surrounding the disappearance, more than a few were willing to help, but they would need time. In the meantime, I did the best I could for Matt. He was still refusing to play, still drawing symbols we weren't allowed to see. I tried to ask a few times what he was creating, which would always cause him to freeze up and say one thing: "The Watchers will come soon. then you will know. And as fate would have it, the translator would send us a message on the 31st of October, 2016, Halloween. All it said was, "Call me now." I picked up my phone without hesitation. Once he answered on the other end, he sounded distant and distorted, as if the phone signal was dying out.
"John, are you there?"
He asked with fear in his voice. "Yeah, what's going on?" I managed to translate pieces of the text. It's talking about another world merging with our own. The children disappearing was just the beginning. They needed kids and their malleable souls to form a link between their world and our own. But the final connection will take time to be created. The signal was lost for a moment, at which point I only heard mumbled intermingling with static. "Are you there? How much time do we have?" I asked.
"I don't know exactly, but it won't be long, and if it..."
He was cut off again.
"John, you have to leave the children behind and get out of town. There's no other..."
The call disconnected. It was too late, I heard Matt say softly from behind. "They're already here." That's the moment I realized just how dark it had gotten outside. It was only 4 p.m. last time I had checked, yet the skies outside were pitch black. "What's going on, Matt?" I asked in terror, but he too looked terrified. And without an answer, he just fled inside his room and locked the door. Despite my fear, I felt compelled to walk over to the window. As I got there, all the lights inside went out, including the street lights outside. The town's power grid had been cut. The screaming started shortly after that, blood-curdling screams as people were being brutally murdered off in the distance. Linda joined me at the window, scared, speechless. Then a brief, dark blue flash filled the neighborhood, followed by a strange black hole floating in the middle of the street. Moments later, a tall, lanky creature with obsidian black skin and a split face exited the void. It looked side to side, observing the neighborhood with unseen eyes before moving away from our house. Just down the street, there was a car that had run into a garden due to the shock of the sudden darkness and screaming. The creature walked in its direction with long steps, reaching out a hand towards the car door. The man inside tried to get out, but he was immediately snatched up by the creature. He let out a quick whimper before his bones audibly shattered from within. He was dead before he could even begin to fight back. Another 3 of the creatures emerged from the void, at which point Linda and I retreated back upstairs to bring Matt with us down into the basement. It was the safest place in our house, built by its previous owner during the Cold War, hidden behind a bookcase. We'd remain there for the rest of the unnatural night, disturbed by the many screams in the distance. It wasn't until daylight finally broke before we could see the true extent of the damage. The creatures had retreated back into the voids, leaving 1/3 of the population dead, with their guts and flesh scattered on the streets. Of the dozen children that had been taken all those years ago, only Matt survived. According to witnesses, the creatures were specifically looking for them, but since our basement was hidden in a windowless bunker, they never found him. In the days following the carnage, we got another call from the translator. He explained that the horrors we'd experienced during the Halloween of 2016 were nothing more than the initial priming for things to come. He said they'd return each following year, always on Halloween, and that everyone within town during the priming were now bound to the place, unable to leave for more than a few days at a time without being killed. Each year they will return. Each year people will die, and it's only going to get worse from here. Hey everyone. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to check out the Dr. No Sleep podcast by clicking the Spotify link in the description below. There you will find more nightmarish horror stories not yet featured on my channel. For iPhone users, just search Dr. No Sleep in the search bar on Apple Podcasts. Now back to the story. For the first time in a decade, an inhabitant of Fairview had agreed to an interview, just a day before Halloween, during the lesser-known annual evacuation. My partner and I managed to grab one of the residents for a quick, voluntary talk. "Sir, you mind telling us what exactly is behind the annual migration?" I asked as I held the microphone close to his face. If we got answers, we'd be the first journalists to ever report on the situation with actual, believable intel. But rather than getting an answer, the man just froze. His eyes lit up in fear. I can't," he stuttered. "They'll know." "Who'll know?" I asked, still insisting on an answer. The man stood silent before me, his eyes darting around us as if he was waiting for someone to strike him down. "The Watchers," his 10-year-old son finally whispered. "Matt, keep quiet," the man ordered. "Who are the Watchers? Why do they force you to leave each Halloween?" I asked. "I just can't tell you. It would risk all of our lives. The only reason I agreed to this interview was to warn you. Stay the hell away from Fairview. If you see a cheap house for sale, if you get an incredible job offer, it doesn't matter. Stay away. Let the town die out. Don't enter its borders." "If it's so terrible, how come you don't move away?" I asked. "You think I haven't tried? No one can leave. If we stay away for more than a few days, they'll get angry. We have until midnight on the 1st of November to return." "Or what?" "I've already said too much. Come on, Matt, let's get out of here." There was something strange about his son that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He looked faded, emotionless. Though he was conscious and aware of his surroundings, his eyes just seemed empty. Alas, I wouldn't get the chance to ask any further questions because the man grabbed his son and fled in the direction away from town. Barriers had been put up on every road, strictly controlled by the local police force. Since the rest of the region was densely covered in forests, it made traversing the area by car an impossible feat without getting caught. "It's not exactly the front page story we were hoping for," Alex said as he turned the sound equipment and camera off. "I guess we have to visit the town itself," I said. "If we get caught and spend a few nights in jail, it would still be worth it." "How? Without a car, we're not getting there with any real equipment," Alex said. "In this case, sacrificing quality for an actual story is worth it." So we drove back to the nearest motel, where we'd set up a portable base. We grabbed the necessities and went to hike through the woods towards Fairview. It was a decently long trek, taking 5 hours on foot, but if we could get actual footage from Halloween within the town, we'd be hailed as heroes back at the office. We'd enter Fairview just past midnight, setting foot in town an hour into Halloween. We snuck deep into the woods, making sure we got past the security checkpoints before going back onto the road. Once we'd made absolutely sure not a single officer stood guard, we took our chances and followed the road straight into town. It was a dark night, cloud-filled skies that refused to rain, barely letting the moon shine through. In the absence of people, the road remained perfectly quiet. It was a silence only briefly interrupted by the odd branch swaying in the wind. "It's a bit too quiet, don't you think?" Alex asked. "Really? Did you just say that?" I joked back. "Seriously though, I mean, where are all the animals and stuff?" He had a point. In the absence of humans in such a densely forested area, I'd normally expect all kinds of animals, but there was nothing there. Shivers shot down my spine, both from the eerie atmosphere as well as the cold, but a minor spook wasn't going to scare us away. Just as midnight rolled around, we could see the town gates in the distance. It was a neatly decorated pair of pillars to signify our arrival, barely lit up in the moonlight. In their absence, the inhabitants of Fairview had cut the electricity, whether it be to save money or for another more ominous reason, we didn't know. On the inside, it was a little more than a ghost town, abandoned to escape something we knew only as the Watchers. But the more we saw, the more we started to think the whole thing was an over-exaggerated case of mass hysteria. "Hey, is that another person?" Alex asked. On the corner, there was a tall woman dressed in a trench coat, facing the wall and drawing strange symbols on it. "Excuse me, ma'am?" I asked as I approached her. Alex seemed more hesitant, but followed suit. I pointed my flashlight in her direction, lighting up the text on the wall. It was red, still dripping down onto the ground, creating silent plops. "Is that?" Alex began. She ignored us, prompting me to go closer as concern arose within me. "Are you all right?" I asked. No response. That's when I first smelled the stench of rot emitting from the woman, combined with a metallic tinge hanging in the air. The crimson text on the wall still poured down the wall, the mystery language hiding its true meaning. Then I saw the tool of her writing. It was the remaining stump and bone of her finger, leaving broken flesh and blood at its tip. She'd been writing on the wall with her own blood. "Oh, God!" I let out. "I think we should leave. This place doesn't feel right," Alex said nervously. I ignored him for a bit and tried to nudge the woman away from the wall to stop her from hurting herself. But no matter how hard I tried, she wouldn't budge. It was as if an unseen force was holding her in place, forcing her to hurt herself. "All right, let's go," I mumbled, finally allowing fear to take over. This is too much. But before we left, I needed proof. I pulled out my phone to record the insane sight. Be it drugs, or a mental illness, or supernatural forces, it didn't matter. The world needed to see it. As I opened the camera application, I realized that I didn't have any signal. It either meant that a jammer had been set up, or that the nearby cell tower also had no power. "Come on, hurry!" Before Alex could finish that statement, we heard a cry for help coming from inside one of the buildings. We rushed towards the sound, only to find it coming from within a boarded-up residential home. Its only entrance was a door marked with a red cross. "Help me," the voice of a woman called out, weirdly monotonous and tired. Alex went to work pulling the planks away from the door, just barely managing to move them. All the while, the strange voice called for help. As we opened the door, we were met with total darkness. Even the minute amount of moonlight penetrating the clouds was halted by the boarded-up windows. "Hello?" I asked. "I'm here," said the voice, coming from the living room. Without hesitation, Alex rushed in, letting out a loud gasp as he saw the woman. I followed closely behind, halting dead in my steps. The woman's skin and muscle had sloughed off, fusing with the chair she sat in. Small tendrils of her meat had slithered along the floor, reaching out towards the body of what must have been a dead cat lying in the corner. "Help me," the woman said, emotionless, her eyes unblinking due to the lack of eyelids. At that moment, my journalistic skills completely failed. Without even thinking to gather evidence, the two of us rushed out from the house. But before we could even begin to process what we'd just witnessed, we saw a sight 10 times more horrifying. There, at the end of the street, wandered a 12 feet tall, lanky creature. It moved away with long, determined steps, seemingly searching the neighborhood. "What the hell is that thing?" Alex whispered. I remember the kid mentioning something called Watchers, but whether he had meant the monstrosity standing before us or another horrific creature, I couldn't tell. Then a few of the doors in the neighborhood opened, and people started walking out. There were about 3 of them, all walking mindlessly towards the Watcher. In response, it turned, reached out a lanky arm, and wrapped it around one of their waists. It squeezed, at which point a central spike seemed to emerge from its palm, penetrating the victim. Only when it pulled away could we see the sharp tendril retreating back into its hand. Once the first victim was let go, they just retreated back into their house, their abdomens torn and their guts visible. I pulled Alex by his arm and signaled for him to start running. We chose the fastest route towards the town gates, only to be stopped as 2 more of the Watchers walked by. They froze as they saw us, almost perplexed that we weren't transfixed like the others. "Run!" I called out, turning around and fleeing. Alex followed suit, only a few feet behind me as the creatures gave chase. With their long steps, they quickly gained ground. As we turned a corner, one of them reached out a hand, narrowly missing myself but getting Alex. "No!" he cried out, but it was too late. There was nothing I could do. I just kept running, escaping inside an unlocked house, praying they hadn't seen me. I thought I was in the clear, but the loss of Alex had rendered me unable to come up with any feasible escape plans. Instead, I chose to sit there and wait for daylight to finally break me free from the nightmare I'd willingly entered. But as the minutes turned to hours and not a single hint of daylight shone through the small cracks in the windows, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't until I heard the door open that I dared move. I grabbed a piece of wood I could wield as a weapon and prepared to fight. But it wasn't a monster that had entered the house. It was Alex. He had a severe abdominal wound, but it wasn't bleeding too severely, meaning he might have a chance at survival. Yet he ignored me completely, apparently in a trance like the other remaining inhabitants of Fairview. He casually walked over to the nearest empty wall. Once there, he pulled on his abdominal wound, covering his hands in blood, and started writing in the same strange language the woman had been writing in. "Day will only come once all are one," he whispered, seeming to translate the text. I jumped at him, hoping to stop him from digging into his own wound, but preventing him from hurting himself was a futile task. I could only watch as he mutilated himself and kept writing. "Day will only come once all are one," he repeated. I tried for hours to stop him from bleeding out, but for each attempt I made, he just hurt himself more until his body just collapsed, dead on the floor. Even then, he didn't stop talking. "Day will only come once all are one." Night still ruled the world outside, and I was starting to understand what he meant. Day wouldn't end until all had been taken by the Watchers, and until then, the night of Halloween would last, which led me to this moment. I've hoped for my phone to regain signal, or for someone to come to my rescue. But with the everlasting night, my phone's internal language has morphed into something similar to the writings on the walls. The only way to end this night is to join the rest of the inhabitants and get embraced by the Watchers. I only pray that once I do, the suffering of all the undead people in Fairview will finally end. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and smash that like button to get notified every time I upload a new video. You can also check out some more of my animated horror stories right here.